In a quaint little town called Whiskerbrook, nestled amidst rolling hills and serene meadows where wildflowers danced in the breeze, lived a curious little kitten named John. With fur as white as fresh snow and eyes that sparkled like morning dew, John was the pride and joy of his father, Jackson, a battle-scarred tomcat whose stern exterior masked a heart of pure gold. Jackson hadn't always been a single father. Years ago, his beloved mate Sarah had disappeared during a terrible storm, leaving him to raise their only son alone. The loss had transformed Jackson from a carefree warrior into an overprotective parent, his every waking moment dedicated to keeping John safe in a world he knew could be cruel. Every morning, as the first rays of dawn painted the sky in watercolor hues, Jackson would perform their daily ritual. He'd straighten John's tiny bow tie, tuck a few coins into his son's velvet paw, and gently touch their noses together. "Off you go, my little one," he would purr, his voice carrying both love and worry. "Remember, no mischief, and eat your lunch. Your mother would want you to grow up strong." John would nod solemnly, but the mischievous glint in his eye never dimmed. As soon as he turned the corner, he'd skip and bounce his way to Whiskerbrook Elementary, where young animals of all species learned together in harmony. Or at least, that was how it usually went. That fateful morning, something felt different. The air carried an unusual chill, and strange shadows seemed to dance at the corners of John's vision. During recess, while other kittens played pawball and chase, John noticed a peculiar sight that made his whiskers twitch. A small, wiry mouse wearing a stained lab coat and crooked glasses, pushing a cart decorated with neon signs and flashing lights. The mouse, who introduced himself as Professor Squeak, had a reputation among the students for his eccentric experiments. Some said he'd been expelled from the prestigious Rodent Academy of Sciences for his dangerous research. Others whispered that he'd once turned a rabbit invisible, permanently. But John, drawn by his natural feline curiosity and the hypnotic swirl of the mysteriously glowing ice cream cones in the cart, ignored the warning bells in his mind. "Step right up, young sir," Professor Squeak called out, his voice carrying an unsettling echo. "Try my latest creation, the Metamorphosis Mint, guaranteed to make your taste buds transform with delight." His crooked whiskers twitched as he handed John a cone that seemed to pulse with an inner green light. Just as John was about to take his first lick, a voice cut through the playground chatter. "John, stop!" It was his best friend Emma, a clever young rabbit who had always been the voice of reason in their friendship. "My older sister told me about Professor Squeak's experiments. They're dangerous." But the warning came too late. The ice cream had already touched John's tongue, and immediately, a strange sensation washed over him. His stomach churned like a washing machine full of rocks, and a sickly green liquid began to ooze from his mouth. The school nurse, Mrs. Hootle, an elderly owl with decades of experience, had never seen anything like it. As they rushed John to the infirmary, his transformation began. It started with his fur, each white hair turning a radioactive shade of green, pulsing with an inner light. His muscles swelled and contorted, ripping through his school uniform. His cute little claws grew into razor-sharp talons, and his eyes became swirling pools of emerald fire. The creature that burst from the infirmary was no longer the sweet little kitten everyone knew. The Green Menace, as it would later be called, was a terrifying fusion of feline agility and monstrous power. It bounded through the hallways on massive legs, leaving glowing green footprints in its wake and filling the air with an otherworldly roar. news of the chaos reached Jackson while he was training at the local dojo, a practice he'd maintained since his days as a street fighter, before Sarah had helped him find a better path. His heart nearly stopped when he heard his son's name mentioned alongside words like monster and destruction. Racing to the school, Jackson arrived to find a scene of absolute chaos. The once pristine building was now covered in glowing green claw marks, and terrified students and teachers huddled behind overturned desks and damaged walls. But what truly chilled his blood was the sound. A horrible mixture of his son's frightened mewing and the roar of something inhuman. As Jackson navigated the devastated hallways, he encountered Emma, who had been following the green menace at a safe distance. "Mr. Jackson," she cried, her ears trembling. It wasn't John's fault. Professor Squeak, his ice cream, it did something to him. She quickly explained everything she'd seen. Rage and determination flooded Jackson's heart. This wasn't just about saving the school anymore. This was about saving his son. But as he tracked the green menace to the gymnasium, he discovered he wasn't the only one with an agenda. Professor Squeak was there, practically dancing with glee as he recorded data on a twisted-looking tablet. "Magnificent," he squeaked. "The transformation is even more complete than I'd hoped. With this success, the military contract is as good as mine." The revelation hit Jackson like a thunderbolt. His son hadn't been an accidental victim. He'd been an unwitting test subject. With a warrior's roar that shook the rafters, Jackson launched himself at the surprised mouse. "What have you done to my son?" But before he could reach Squeak, the green menace intervened, swatting Jackson aside like a toy. The impact sent him crashing through the basketball hoop, but he landed on his feet, years of training taking over. As father and transformed son faced each other across the gymnasium floor, Jackson saw something that gave him hope. Deep within those glowing green eyes, a flicker of recognition. "John," Jackson called out softly, taking a cautious step forward. "Son, I know you're in there. Remember what I told you about your mother? How she always said that love was the strongest force in the world?" The green menace's roar faltered slightly. Professor Squeak, seeing his experiment slipping away, pulled out a remote control. "No, he's mine now." He pressed a button, and John's transformed body convulsed in pain, the green glow intensifying. The sight of his son in agony awakened something in Jackson, a power he hadn't touched since his fighting days. With lightning speed, he executed a perfect spinning kick, knocking the remote from Squeak's paws and crushing it beneath his heel. But destroying the remote had an unexpected effect. The green menace's power surged out of control, its body growing even larger, demolishing parts of the gymnasium roof. Debris rained down, and Jackson heard Emma's frightened scream as she became trapped beneath a fallen beam. In that moment, John's true nature shone through the monster's facade. The green menace hesitated, looking between its father and the trapped rabbit. Then, with tremendous effort, it began fighting against its own transformation, taking one painful step after another toward Emma. Jackson watched in awe as his son battled the monster within, each step seeming to cost him tremendous effort. The green menace reached Emma and, with surprising gentleness, lifted the beam trapping her. As she scrambled to safety, she placed a tiny paw on the monster's massive leg. "Thank you, John," she whispered. That simple act of kindness proved to be the tipping point. The green menace's form began to flicker and shrink, the sickly green glow fading. But Professor Squeak wasn't finished. In a last desperate attempt, he threw a vial of glowing liquid toward John. Jackson moved without thinking, diving between his son and the vial. The glass shattered against his chest, and for a moment, everyone feared he would transform as well. But instead, the liquid seemed to evaporate harmlessly against his fur. "Impossible!" Squeak shrieked. "Unless—" His eyes widened in recognition. "You're immune. You're the one who survived the original experiment all those years ago." The truth crashed over Jackson like a wave. The memories he'd suppressed came flooding back. The secret laboratory, the experiments, Sarah's determination to shut them down, the storm that had claimed her. It hadn't been a natural storm at all. As police sirens wailed in the distance, Jackson gathered his now normal-sized son in his arms, holding him close as tears streamed down both their faces. Professor Squeak tried to flee but found himself cornered by Emma and several other students, who had armed themselves with sports equipment from the gymnasium. In the aftermath, as the authorities led Squeak away in special reinforced handcuffs, John recovered in the hospital with his father by his side. The experience had left its mark on both of them. A few strands of John's fur remained permanently green, and Jackson's protective instincts were stronger than ever. But it had also given them something precious, a deeper understanding of each other's strength and the unbreakable bond between them. Emma became a regular visitor during John's recovery, bringing him homework and sharing stories about how he'd become something of a hero at school. The students had started calling him the Green Guardian instead of the Green Menace, focusing on how he'd saved Emma despite his transformation. As for Jackson, the revelation about his past led him to reopen the investigation into Sarah's disappearance. Perhaps, he thought, it wasn't too late to give John the complete family he deserved. But that would be another story, another adventure waiting to unfold in the enchanting town of Whiskerbrook. For now, father and son were content to sit together in the warm sunshine, sharing ice cream, carefully sourced from a reputable shop, and talking about the future. John's adventures had taught him valuable lessons about trust, courage, and the importance of listening to those who love you. And Jackson had learned that sometimes the bravest thing a parent can do is let their child face challenges and grow stronger from them. As the sun set over Whiskerbrook, casting long shadows across the town's winding streets, a gentle breeze carried the sound of purring from the hospital window. The contented sound of a family that had faced darkness together and emerged stronger, bound by a love that no transformation could ever change.